All right, we're going to go ahead and start. We finished up talking about the Boston Tea Party, and there are results and consequences from the Boston Tea Party. When we throw between 98,000 and 92,000 pounds of tea into the Boston Harbor, I know that's just a drop in the bucket considering the 17 million pounds they have. But to give you an idea of how much money is being set aside and is about to be wasted, the 92,000 pounds of tea is close to, in today's money, worth $1 million. So you can imagine what 17 million pounds. You're talking money in the billions dollars. And if you throw $1 million of something away, just going to say the FBI, the CIA, somebody's coming for you. And in this day, when we throw $1 million worth of tea into the harbor, they're coming for us. They're not happy. So what they do is they pass in 1774, right after that, something called the Coercive Acts is what they call it. Coerce means to sweet talk somebody. This was not sweet talk. This is not sweet talk at all. What this is what we called intolerable acts. Intolerable means you can't bear it. It is just not, you can't do it. Like dating a Sweetwater cheerleader. I mean, oh my word, can't do it. So intolerable, what it meant to us is it was worse than we could ever imagine. First thing they did, they closed the Boston Harbor, put boats out there so no boats are going in or out. And if you remember, the Sons of Liberty, most of them were fishermen. And if you weren't making your money off fish, remember on chapter 2, we talked about the New England colonies dependent on the ocean. If you weren't making your money off fish, you're still shipping stuff. You're cutting the wood, you're putting it on a boat, sending it across the ocean. You can't do that right now. So literally all these guys have lost their paychecks until they can pay the $1 million a tea. To put it in today's perspective, there's about 20,000 people lived in Boston. That's like for every person, you got to pay $5,000. For me, I would have had to pay $20,000 because I got 4 people in a family. I ain't got $20,000 laying around. I ain't got 20. But there's no way these people can pay that off, and they're not going to have a job until they pay it off. It's almost like the sense behind debtor's prison where there's no way to fix it. So now all these guys they're hurt in their pocketbook. Then the government was taken away from them. They had self-appointed representative government, and it went right back to being dukes, duchesses, lords, ladies in charge. That's why they left England. This is intolerable to them. So they also they put so many British troops just in Boston that is literally insane. At that point, 1 out of 3 people would have been a soldier in Boston. That is way too many soldiers in Boston. Then the last part of why we call it the Intolerable Acts is any British soldier, if you committed a crime, like when they had the problem with the Boston Massacre, those guys got tried here in America because that's where the crime happened. Now, if the soldier or the British soldier does anything, he goes to England for trial. I don't care if he kills a person over here, if he steals, rapes, kills, murder, whatever. You're going to go to England to be tried, and guess what? You're going to be found innocent. It's basically giving free reign for these soldiers to do what they want, to who they wanted, how they wanted. And it's intolerable, is the whole point of why we called it the Intolerable Acts. But it was in response to the Boston Tea Party. That brings us to when the Intolerable Acts happen, then you're going to have something the same year in 1774 called the First Continental Congress. The First Continental Congress is where we're going to send representatives from each colony to Philadelphia. If you remember Philadelphia, lets anybody show up. They are very welcoming to everybody's society. So it doesn't matter who you are, what colony you're coming from, what your religion is, you're welcome in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, huge city, but also very open city. They send everybody to Philadelphia, representatives from each state, except for Georgia. Georgia, if you remember at this time, is a bunch of criminals that have been released from prison and started a new life. The last thing they want to hear is, hey, let's go beat up a cop. No, thank you. I just got out of jail, is what they're thinking. So they don't send a representative. They will be at the Second Continental Congress. They go to a place called Independence Hall. This is where you're going to have the First Continental Congress. You're going to have the Second Continental Congress. You're going to write the Declaration of Independence. This is a sacred, hallowed building to me. Oh, wow. The people that stood in this building, you're talking Sam Adams, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, all these guys in one building. they get together and they start talking about what are we going to do and everything. And at first, and if you look at the test question right at the bottom, they didn't meet to get independence. That's not going to be for another 2 years. They first meet to try and figure out a way to solve the conflict. And it actually is a bunch of debate back and forth for a while. And then Patrick Henry gets up and gives a speech. And when Patrick Henry gets up and gives his speech, it persuades people towards patriotism. He starts off, because remember, your state is everything. The speech starts off, I am not a Virginian. I'm an American. Whoa, that's the first time anybody's considered the word American, because before that, we're British subjects living in this land. Now he's like, no, we're not British. We're our own people. That is an opening shot of a statement, that if there ever was one. His speech is very passionate, very good, and it ends with this then. He says, I know not what course others may take. Meaning, I don't know what you're going to decide. He says, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death. Meaning, I'm either going to die fighting for my freedom, or you're going to give me my freedom. One of the two. But I'm having freedom, one way or the other. Whoa, what a statement. At that statement, there was a lot of people start to push for independence. We're not there yet, though. But what we do agree to do at that point is we're going to boycott all British goods. They are wearing homespun, homemade clothes. They're drinking the roots off of trees to try and, because they're not paying for tea. These guys are giving up every one of their creature comforts, everything in life they like, so that one day you will be able to have freedom. And so, my word, I just have mad respect for these guys, that they're willing to, anything British coming into the colonies, we're not buying. What is that going to do? That's going to punch them right in the pocketbook. The whole reason they're doing all this stuff is because they've lost money. And so you punch them in the pocketbook, it's going to hurt them even worse. The other thing we do is agree to have militias. Every state, every town is going to have its own militia. A militia is an armed group of civilians. In fact, our Second Amendment, it's about militias. Don't let them confuse you that it's about different hunting or whatever. No, it's about having military-style firearms so that if the government gets out of control, you can defend yourself. That's exactly what the Second Amendment's about. And we are going to start by making militias. The word militia actually appears in the Second Amendment, talking about for a well-formed militia, you need to have the right to bear arms. Meaning you got to have guns if you're going to be an army, a civilian. They agree to form militias. They're going to call these guys Minutemen. Why are they referred to as Minutemen? They are going to go home, put a gun by the door, have it ready to go. Then they're going to have a bag next to it. And it's going to have their knife, their blankets, their food, everything in it. So that whenever the British come to attack, somebody's going to come run into the door and knock that off when I knock. They're going to come run to the door and they're going to knock. And when they knock, you had better, I don't care if you're in your PJs and it's 2 a.m, because that's when it's actually going to happen. You got to jump out of your PJs, get into clothes, and grab your stuff and out the door within 1 minute. That's the goal, is you're to be ready in 1 minute to go fight. Because we don't have a military standing. We're just a bunch of civilians. So these guys will be referred to as Minutemen. This is where we leave off. Everybody's agreeing to these two things, and then those people go back to their states. This is a picture right there of Independence Hall, and you can see them going over this, debating it and stuff like that. Let me inform you what happens then. These guys then go back to their states. What happens first is New Hampshire. New Hampshire is a bunch of rednecks at this point. It is way up there. It's close to the Canadian border. In fact, it touches the Canadian border. Why is this important? There's forts all along the Canadian border of British soldiers worried for France. But they're not worried right now for France because we've just ended the 7 Years' War, or AKA French and Indian War. And so the French aren't a problem. And in fact, most of the forts are at half staff, meaning most of the soldiers that were there are in Boston right now. So the New Hampshire militia realizes we don't have enough gunpowder and we don't have cannons. Cannons are like the tank of its day. You go against a cannon with guns, you're not going to win. And so they want some cannons to be able to fight a well-organized militia, Second Amendment. So the New Hampshire militia actually goes up to the border and raids a fort. They steal 100 barrels of gunpowder and 16 cannons. Just so you know, if you decide to go to Sweetwater Armory and steal 16 tanks, they will come looking for you. All right? And when we steal 16 cannons, they are going to come looking for us. That is, yeah, it's a given. So what happens is they decide they're not going to keep the cannons and the gunpowder in New Hampshire because that's kind of obvious. I hope none of your parents have ever taught this to you, but don't keep stolen goods at the house. If your parents have taught you that, you have bigger questions to answer to, all right? But don't want to keep stolen goods at your house because then you implicate it. So they take these cannons and gunpowder and they put them in Concord, Massachusetts. Why? It's 20 miles from Boston. Sons of Liberty can guarantee you they're going to be guarding it. And it's a safer place then. A bunch of Sons of Liberty around that area. All the gunpowder, the cannons, they're taken down to Concord. With that many British troops hanging out in Boston, word is going to get out. And word gets out that, hey, Concord is where they have all the cannons, they have all the gunpowder. And so General Gage is told by the King George, you are to go get that. And what he's going to do, if you look at the map here in a second, we'll get closer to it. You've got two options to go to Concord. One, by land. You could go across through Lexington up to Concord. Two, by sea. You could go out of Boston, catch the Charles River, go up, kind of follow it through, and it comes out at the back of Concord. One comes in the front, one comes in the back. They actually have people watching at the army base for when they decide to go get it. They're going to march out, and the soldiers, British soldiers, are going to do one thing or two things. First, they could walk down the road. That's one by land. And if they get on the boat, two by sea. And what happens as soon as this guy sees this, he is to row his boat across the harbor. No one's going to stop a rowboat in the harbor. That looks normal. In fact, though, the guy has actually taken cloth and put around the oars so that if he has to do it at night, nobody even hears him. And so maybe you could sneak even easier at night because rowing in the harbor at night does look a little fishy. So the guy sees them leaving. It is at night, and there the British Redcoats are to march 20 miles towards Concord, get the cannons back. That dude rows across, tells Paul Revere. We all think of Paul Revere as a dude on his horse, sees the light, and then rides off and warns everybody. That is not what happened at all. There is like 10 to 12 people that have to go out because there's a lot of houses of these Sons of Liberty and the militia, and they know who they are in them. They need to go out and warn them. So you're going to have a bunch of people like Samuel Prescott, William Dawes are going to be some of the guys that go and they do a great job. Why do we know Paul Revere? I love Paul Revere, great patriot. He's going to mess this up worse than a Sweet Plain spelling bee is what's going to happen that night. I mean, it's going to be bad. Paul Revere, love him. This is not his night. This is not his night at all. His first job, like I said, we picture that. The reason we know Paul Revere, in the 1880s, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow is going to write a poem about this event. And he looks at all the names, and Revere rhymes very well. So the poem actually starts out, listen, my children, and you will hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. See, Revere rhymes with fear, near. I mean, so many things, right? So Henry Wadsworth Longfellow uses that name to write the story. Sadly, everybody else did a good job that night, other than Paul Revere. So that's where the mistake comes in on the midnight ride. What Paul did then, we always picture him on the horse. He's the one who runs up to the steeple and holds the lanterns up. He's the first job of that. What happened was 2 months before this, Revere took a job at the Old North Church as the bell ringer. Is he getting paid? And does he want to do this? No, but he can go into the steeple any time of day. And if you've done it for 2 months, no soldier is going to question you. You're going to your work. You're doing what you're supposed to. And so Paul is able to sneak in, hold the lanterns up. They are marching by land, so he holds up one lantern. If they would have gone by sea, 2 lanterns he would hold up. There are people watching around Boston, and once they see that lantern up there, they get on their horse, ride, and start telling everybody, get to Concord, it's going down now. Like I said, William Dawes, Samuel Prescott, they do a great job. There's even a little 12-year-old girl, her dad is supposed to be doing the midnight ride. Her dad's got pneumonia and he's sick in bed. And when that night is the night that it happens, she's out supposed to be watching. She sees the lantern, runs in, tells her dad. Her dad can't go. He's so sick he can't get out of bed. The little girl says, I'll go. And they have to pick her up and put her on her dad's horse. She's too tiny to get up and down off the horse. Her mom then gives her a stick. And what this girl did, she would ride her horse right up to your house and beat on the house with a stick because she can't get on and off without help. And say, get to Concord, and then take off. It isn't the phrase, the British are coming. They knew the British were coming. They're going to Concord, is basically what they're saying. So, what did Paul Revere do that night? Why am I dogging on him? He holds the lanterns for a while. Once he's held the lanterns, he knows he's behind a little bit. He's in a hurry. He gets out, takes off on his horse, gets to a place where there's a Y in the road. He takes the wrong one. He actually rides for a couple miles in the wrong direction. At this point, he realizes this. You could go back and go the other way, or because the went like Y, you could cut across the fields in the middle of the night and get to that road over there, which is what he decides to do. Problem being, there's 3 British redcoats on that road. If you see somebody riding a horse at full gallop at 2 in the morning out in the field, just so you know, they're going to ask questions. That is not hey, looks like he's having fun. Trust me, try going mudding, because some of you around here have tried this. Go mud running out with your Jeep or something like that at 2 o'clock in the morning, doing donuts in the field. If you see a cop car, they will ask what's going on. Just so you know. Trust me on that one. Just don't ask. Just trust me on that one. All of a sudden, the soldiers stop him, and they ask him, what are you doing? Have you seen those guys that can lie really well? That's not Paul. Paul is like, the horse ride, and these 3 guys think he's a drunk skunk that's an idiot. So what do? They take his horse from him, and he has to walk all the way back to Boston. So what did Paul Revere do that night? He held up the lanterns, needed that done. Then he got lost, cut across the field, had his horse stolen, and walked home. Total number of people warned, 0. But he was part of it, and Henry Wadsworth Longfellow just used that name. So these guys now, the British soldiers, are headed towards Concord. They first have to go through Lexington. All the Patriots and Sons of Liberty are running there, trying to get the gunpowder out of Concord and get it hidden. The British redcoats are marching there. They look at Sergeant John Parker and tell him, hey, you need to slow them up. Sergeant John Parker takes about 20 guys, goes to Lexington. They're going to try and slow up the British redcoats. When they get to Lexington, the British all form up. That takes a little line. Now, our guys, are 20 of them standing there. It's just not going to go well because there's 700 British redcoats. I mean, John Parker knows he's about to lose. He's doing this so you can have liberty, guys. Because then what happens is they start a yelling match back and forth for a while, and then Sergeant John Parker makes this statement, and it is beautiful. He yells across to them, if you mean to have war, let it start right here. And that's when shots rang out. There's 8 that are dead right there, 10 that are wounded, and you're going to have 2 that take off and go. They died, y'all. This was what was going to happen. But were they slowing them up long enough to get the gunpowder out and set up the plan? Yes, that's what they did. So then they march on to Concord, the 700 British redcoats. They come into Concord. There's a little 1-lane bridge to get into it and a steep river right there that is deep. They have, at the end of the bridge, built a fire, and it's actually onto the bridge. So your 2 options are you can walk through the fire, British redcoats, which with gunpowder on your side, not a good idea. Or you could swim across the river and attack them. With gunpowder, not a good idea to go swimming. So they literally have the British stopped. You can't get into Concord. The British are in a volley for about 2 minutes, so shooting back and forth. It's only 2 minutes because the British realize at that point, we ain't getting in. And we have finally learned something from the French and Indian War. We're hiding behind stuff. So what happens then is the British start to run back. Most of the Sons of Liberty and stuff there, once they hid the gunpowder, they went and back along the road. This was Sam's plan. They hide along the road. And once the British start to march back, one of them will pop up from behind a rock, bam, shoot one, and then run. Killed one of them right there. Then somebody will pop up another, 100 yards down the road, bam, shoot one, and run. After about 6 of them get dropped, they realize they're about to be ambushed the entire way back. And they have just marched 20 miles, fought 2 battles. Now they are running 20 miles to get back. We have 400 Sons of Liberty hidden along that road that do some damage. The British listed as 200 dead, 74, I love this, missing. What does that mean? 74 were wounded, and Sam and the boys made sure they could be DRTs. Those bodies are never found. They are dead right there. Sam and the boys took care of that problem. The British then get back to Boston, and they just lost close to 300 guys of their 700. We kicked their hiney. I mean, that's the only way you can put it. It is not going to stay that way. We're going to win 1 or 2 times, and then it's going to look like a Sequoia High School football game. We're going to get our heinies kicked. So, but then we do come back at the end. I'm not spoiling the Revolutionary War for you, ahead of time that we win. Hope that doesn't spoil it. After they get back and everything, they refer to this as the shot heard round the world. It's not that it's a large, large gun. It's that the rest of the world was watching, because we are the first nation to say we want independence and freedom, and we're going to go willing to fight for it. And now the rest of the world wants to know what's going to happen, because they're all in the same situation. And if you watch timeline of world history, once the revolution is over, then we get our own government. It's 2 to 3 years after that, France has their own revolution, because people want to be free. And they saw that people could earn their freedom. And then it spreads around the world to where there was a lot of nations starting to earn their freedoms at that point. So this wraps up what's going on. I'll fly through the pictures just real quick. There's some YouTubes you go watch. There's the bridge. You can see how thin it was, and you can see Lexington on the way to Concord. But that means, y'all, the war is on. We will be picking up chapter 6 starting tomorrow. I will see you all then. Thank you. Peace out.